The Gulf War was over, but for the people of Iraq, the story was just beginning. The lightning-fast defeat on the battlefield marked the start of a different kind of war, one without bombs, without tanks, yet just as devastating. This was the era of sanctions, a decade of isolation and internal struggle that would reshape Iraq and seal the fate of its leader, Saddam Hussein. Welcome to the story of a nation under siege, not by armies, but by the global economy itself. This is the chapter that determined what came next. February 1991. The guns fell silent across the Kuwaiti desert. Coalition forces, having achieved their objective of liberating Kuwait, made a critical decision. They stopped short of Baghdad. Saddam Hussein, against all odds, survived politically. He remained in power, his regime wounded but not defeated. The world, however, was not finished with him. Having won the military victory, the international community turned its attention to a new strategy, punishing Iraq through severe economic pressure. The hope was that by cutting off Saddam's resources, he would be forced to comply with international demands, and his ability to threaten his neighbors would be neutralized. But this economic war would have consequences far beyond the halls of power, reaching into every home, every hospital, and every marketplace in Iraq. The country's infrastructure lay in ruins, its oil fields were ablaze, and a new, invisible war was about to begin. The age of sanctions had dawned. In April 1991, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 687, imposing some of the most comprehensive and harshest sanctions in modern history. Iraq was effectively excommunicated from the global economy. It was forbidden from selling its oil, the lifeblood of its economy. It was barred from importing virtually all goods, from heavy machinery needed to rebuild its shattered cities, to the simplest spare parts for water treatment plants. The goal was clear: to force Iraq to dismantle its weapons of mass destruction programs, recognize Kuwait's sovereignty, and pay war reparations. But the immediate effect on the ground was catastrophic. The Iraqi economy, already battered by war, completely collapsed. The value of the dinar plummeted, and hyperinflation wiped out the savings of the middle class overnight. Essential supplies vanished from shelves. Hospitals ran out of anesthesia. Schools lacked textbooks, and factories ground to a halt. As the world watched, a team of uninspectors began arriving, tasked with the monumental job of finding and destroying Saddam's hidden arsenal. The sanctions were meant to disarm a regime, but they were slowly strangling a nation. As Iraq became a pariah state, sealed off from the outside world, Saddam Hussein did what he did best. He tightened his grip. The sanctions, intended to weaken him, ironically became his most powerful tool for internal control. He skillfully redirected the blame for the country's suffering, pointing the finger, not at his own disastrous invasion of Kuwait, but at the United States and the United Nations. State television became a constant drumbeat of propaganda, portraying Saddam as the defiant Arab leader, standing alone against a cruel and unjust West. His image was everywhere on murals, in schoolbooks, and on the lips of officials. The cult of personality, already strong, reached new heights. He presented himself as the father of a nation under siege, the only one who could protect them. Behind this carefully crafted image, his security apparatus, the infamous Mukhabarat, worked tirelessly. Surveillance intensified, and the ever-present fear of dissent kept the population in check. Any hint of opposition was ruthlessly crushed. For Saddam, an isolated Iraq was a controllable Iraq. While the Iraqi people struggled to survive, a new battlefield emerged. It wasn't fought in the desert with tanks, but in dusty warehouses and tense meeting rooms with clipboards. UN weapons inspection teams, known as UNSCOM, fanned out across the country. Their mission was to hunt down and destroy Iraq's chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons programs, along with its long-range missiles. This led to a relentless high-stakes game of cat and mouse. The inspectors would demand access to a sensitive presidential palace or a military site. The Iraqis would delay, deny, and accuse the inspectors of espionage. Each confrontation became a major, international incident. From Washington, officials accused Iraq of systematically hiding its weapons and deceiving the world. From Baghdad, Saddam Hussein claimed the inspections were a violation of Iraqi sovereignty, a tool of American foreign policy designed to humiliate him and his people. The truth was likely somewhere in between. But with every standoff, every heated accusation, the trust between Iraq and the West eroded further, and the global tension ratcheted up another notch. By the mid-1990s, the humanitarian crisis in Iraq had become impossible to ignore. Reports and images of malnourished children in hospitals unable to perform basic surgeries flooded the international media. The sanctions, meant to target a dictator, were devastating an entire generation of civilians. Faced with growing international pressure and moral outrage, the United Nations was forced to rethink its strategy. The result was the Oil for Food program, launched in 1996. It was a complex and controversial compromise. Iraq would be allowed to sell a limited, uncontrolled amount of oil on the world market. The revenue wouldn't go to Saddam's government directly. Instead, it would be placed in a unmanaged escrow account to be used exclusively for purchasing food, medicine, and other essential humanitarian supplies for the Iraqi people. On the surface, it seemed like a solution, but in practice, it was riddled with problems. The program was bureaucratic and slow. Worse, it created a massive black market and opened the door to widespread corruption, with Saddam's regime finding ways to skim profits and control the distribution of aid to reward loyalists and punish dissenters. The food and medicine that did get through were often not enough, and the relief was unevenly felt across the country. Inside Iraq, life under sanctions was a daily struggle for survival. The initial shock of the post-war collapse had settled into a grim, grinding reality. Electricity was a luxury, available for only a few hours a day, if at all. Clean water became increasingly scarce as purification plants broke down for lack of spare parts. Hospitals, once the pride of the Middle East, were now scenes of quiet desperation, lacking basic equipment, anesthesia, and even simple antibiotics. Poverty, once rare in the oil-rich nation, was now widespread. In 1994, the economy hit rock bottom, forcing the government to issue new currency with Saddam's face on it, rendering old notes worthless overnight. This economic desperation began to seep into the military, where morale was collapsing. Soldiers were poorly paid and underfed. Yet, amidst this nationwide decay, Saddam Hussein projected an image of defiance and strength. He ordered the construction of lavish new palaces, massive monuments to his power that stood in stark contrast to the suffering of his people. It was a clear message to both his own citizens and the world: I am still here, and I am still in control. By the end of the 1990s, the fragile stalemate was beginning to crumble. The sanctions had failed to remove Saddam from power, and the cat-and-mouse game with weapons inspectors had exhausted everyone's patience. In 1998, after a final series of confrontations, Iraq expelled the UNSCOM inspectors for good. In response, the United States and the United Kingdom launched Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign against suspected weapons sites. The conflict was no longer a Cold War of economic pressure. It was heating up again. In Washington, a new consensus was forming. Sanctions and containment were seen as a failure. A growing chorus of influential voices argued that the only way to truly solve the Iraq problem was through regime change. The decade of sanctions, a period born from the ashes of one war, had now paved the road directly toward another. The Sanctions Era was coming to an end, and the world was preparing for a new and far deadlier chapter. Join us next time for Episode 9, as we explore the path to the 2003 war. Thanks for watching.